right, great. Well, join me tonight in Second Chronicles, chapter 10. And Lord willing, we'll take a look at the entire reign of King Rehoboam tonight. So this is Second Chronicles chapter 10 and hopefully 11 and 12 as we go through. And if you have the handout there, you could see on the left side is just a chart of the kings. It's a good time right now to kind of point out that we've gone through Solomon's reign and David and Saul's reign, and then David, and then Solomon. And it's at that time, at Solomon's death, and we're going to read about it tonight, that the kingdom divides into north and south. And it's a very important sort of geographic feature, political feature, but also religious feature of the nation to really have your arms around. Because as the rest of the Old Testament unfolds, this is a critical piece to understand, that there is there's a northern kingdom, and then there's a southern kingdom called Judah. The northern kingdom generally takes on the name Israel, or sometimes it takes on the name Ephraim, or the northern kingdom. And we're going to be reading in the book of Second Chronicles almost exclusively just the events of the southern kingdom, or Judah. If you want to get the events of both of them back and forth as they happen, you read about that in the Kings, in the books of Samuel's and Kings. But here in the Chronicles, it's really going to very heavily just trace the kings through Judah, through the kings of Judah as the nation splits up here. And so we'll see that even today, that the kingdom will split. Solomon is just passed, and his son Rehoboam takes the throne today. So we're transitioning to the reign of Rehoboam. These are major decision points that are happening in the nation as Solomon's son Rehoboam takes the throne. Huge decisions that will affect the entire nation in many ways. And there's no better theme to think about when you're thinking about the life and the reign of King Rehoboam than this idea of there's major times in life where there's division. Or there's just stark choices that need to be made. Well, we're either going to do this or we're going to do this. And it's going to lead to a major difference. And the life of Rehoboam is the best time to see that. These major decision points, sometimes it's decision points, sometimes it's a major disagreement with somebody else in your life around you, and they thrust you into making a choice one way or the other. And it's in times like that someone's heart really comes out, and you really find out what's been in you for a long time. It will come out in those decision times. And not just with King Rehoboam, but through many people in this time period tonight that we look at, you'll see that many of them had major chances to make decisions that would affect generations to come. It all happens here tonight. Can you think back in your life and think about a time where you made a major decision that just radically changed the future of yourself or those around you? That these things happen. I think of just even in the fact that we moved. We moved 700 miles away from where the kids were being raised in Maine. We brought them down here to Pennsylvania, which was familiar to us, but to them it was brand new. And so that radically altered things for us, not just us, but for them. And I bet many of you could think of things off the top of your head. And I want to just challenge you tonight to think about that we don't always have time to plan those things. Sometimes you do, but those marks can really make dramatic differences in your life. And we need to take advantage of these things to choose what is right. And take a look at that theme as we go through here. We're going to look at 3 different decision points that really will launch us into whatever our heart is truly deciding. In chapter 10, the first one is this: dealing with doubters. Rehoboam will take the throne after his father Solomon dies, and he will have to deal with doubters. And the question is, will we listen to man's counsel? And at first thought, you're thinking, well, this is a Bible lesson, so the answer must be, no, we shouldn't listen to man's counsel. Well, that's not always true, is it? In fact, in the Proverbs, it says, in the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom, right? There's a time to listen to people's counsel and take it in and consider, well, what are they advising me? Are they advising me to follow the Lord, or are they advising me to not follow the Lord? right? I mean, I think of even in the book of Deuteronomy, the Lord warned the people that when a prophet would come up and tell you, hey, you should make a change and you should go do this. You didn't just do it because somebody told you, but you took it to God's word and you considered whether or not that counsel was biblical, whether it was truthful, whether it could be from the Lord or not. Well, in chapter 10, Rehoboam's going to be faced with a major decision point, and the question is going to be, will he listen to men's counsel? Chapter 10, let's take a look. Verse 1. Rehoboam went to Shechem, the city of Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king, because of course his father Solomon had just died. And it happened that when Rehoboam, the son of let me clarify in verse 2. And it happened when Jeroboam, that's a totally different person, when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, for he was in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, Jeroboam returned from Egypt. Then in verse 3, they sent and they called for Jeroboam, and Jeroboam and all Israel came and they spoke to Rehoboam, saying to him in verse 4, hey, Rehoboam, your father made our yoke harsh, but now we want you to lighten the harsh service of your father in his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and then we will serve you. And then he said to them, this is Rehoboam the king, he said to them, return to me again in 3 days. And so the people went away. So in other words, Rehoboam the king, the new king, needed time to make this decision based on their petition, on their request. There's a very much a need here to understand that there's a backstory that we're not given in this text. We just ended chapter 9 the last time we were together with the life of Solomon. Solomon died, and here we are with his son Rehoboam taking over. But we're introduced to this account here in verse 2 and 3 that makes it clear that there was something happening between Jeroboam and King Solomon when King Solomon was still the king, right? You can see that there in verse 2. Well, we could go back and we could read the entire chapter of 1 Kings 11, and we would get the backstory to this. And it tells us how Jeroboam, with a J, the names are virtually one letter different between the new king Rehoboam and this leader named Jeroboam. Jeroboam was one of the chief leaders of the people that were doing the work. He was one of Solomon's trusted leaders. If you remember all the workers that they had assigned, and then I think there was like 2,800 leaders assigned to the work, and Jeroboam was one of those chief leaders in all of Solomon's building projects. And this Jeroboam, he was upset with the hard task that Solomon was putting him to. He requested it to change under the life of when Solomon was king, and it wasn't happening. And then this Jeroboam, he received prophecy from a true prophet of God that came to him and said that the Lord was going to give to him, Jeroboam, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. That 10 of the 12 tribes would be ripped away from the house of David, and this Jeroboam was going to receive them. And it was all going to happen because of Solomon's idolatry. And so this Jeroboam had that promise, and he was specifically even told that it was going to happen in the days of Solomon's son, when Solomon's son took the throne. And so this Jeroboam fled to Egypt to be safe, living in another country until the time was right. And then now, since the prophecy seems to be coming to pass, that Solomon's son Rehoboam's on the throne. Here he is. He's come back from Egypt, and now he has this request. Rehoboam, the new king, has to judge this request. Hey, should I lighten their burden? Should I make their work? I mean, this is a typical union dispute is what we're up against here, right? Like Jeroboam is the union leader, and he's going to the boss and saying, we're going to go on strike unless something changes here. And so that's what we're up against. Jeroboam wants relief for his entire tribe for the heavy work that they've been under. And look, is it okay for him to ask this request? Is there anything wrong with Jeroboam coming to the king and asking for this? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's no problem with him asking. Rehoboam doesn't know how to answer, and he says that he needs some time to look at this, and he's gonna weigh their request. Hey, you guys can feel free to turn these 2 heaters off if you want to on the side. There's 2 heaters on right now. If you guys are hot, feel free to turn them off. Open some windows if you want to. I can see everybody swatting themselves, so feel free to open some windows if you guys need it. All right. So the request is fine, is what I'm after here. The request is fine for him to ask this, and Rehoboam needs time. And that's where we pick it up in verse 6. So then in verse 6 it says, Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the elders who had stood before his father Solomon while he was still alive. And he said to them, How do you counsel me to respond to these people? So who is he asking here? He's asking the older folks that had been around in the days of Solomon. And what is their counsel? It says here in verse 7, They spoke to him and they said, If you will be good to this people and please them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. And so these older men that have been around since the days of Solomon, the old wise counsel is, yes, show them some relief. In fact, the idea is sort of the same counsel that Jesus would give, which is the way up is the way down. Hey, look, Rehoboam, show yourself a servant to them. Show yourself kind to them. Be willing to, work for them, to cooperate with them, to make things work. That was the old wise counsel that they're given. In fact, I want to actually read to you from the Gospel of Mark, the way the Lord put it here. It says here that in calling them to himself, Jesus said to his disciples, You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles, they lord it over them. And they're great men. They exercise authority over them. But it's not this way. It should not be this way among you. But instead, he says, Whosoever wishes to become great among you should be your servant. He goes on to say, And whosoever wishes to be first among you shall be a slave to everyone. For even the Son of Man, speaking of himself, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So the idea that Christ is saying is, show yourself willing to serve along with everybody else. In fact, be willing to do it all. And that is what will prompt others into unity and service with you. Show them that you're willing to be a part of it, that you're not some ruler above it all that's untouchable. And that's the old wise counsel that Solomon is given. But it doesn't stop there, because in verse 8 it continues here, and it says in verse 8, But he forsook the counsel of the elders, which they had counseled him, and he took counsel with the young men, the men that grew up with him and stood before him. And he said to them, What counsel do you give, that we may respond to this people who have given to me, saying, Lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Well, then the young men, in verse 10, who grew up with him, spoke with him, saying, Thus you shall say to the people who have spoken to you, saying, Your father made your yoke heavy, but you make it light for us. Thus, this is what you should say to the ones that said, Your father made it heavy, you should make it light for us. Thus you shall say to them, My little finger is thicker than my father's loins. In verse 11, So now my father loaded you with a heavy yoke, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips. Well, I will discipline you with scorpions. And so the young men, the indication here, and the general bias that what we're generally talking about here is the young men. These are people that are still seeking position in the kingdom, right? Have you ever had a job where some of you will recognize this as you're in a job for a while and you've just arrived at that spot, at that promotion where you're like, I don't want to go any higher. Like, I'm good right where I'm at. Has that happened to any of you guys? Where you've gotten to that place where you're like, if I go any higher, it's management, it's like a whole nother world, or you're comfortable with the layer that you've gotten to, and you're like, this is where I want to be. I don't have a great desire to go to another thing. That often happens after you've been with a company for a while, or you've been in a position for a while. You've found what's working, and that's where you want to be, right? Well, that's the general problem that he's receiving here from these young men. These young men, they've just joined the administration, and they're still jockeying for position, right? Like, you've got like the deputy secretary of war, and he wants to be the secretary of war, and they're still fighting it out amongst themselves with all of their pride and ambition to want to do different things and promote and move up, and they're all worried. That's their whole mindset is stuck on this idea of, well, we have to be worried about people trying to get the spot that I want. We can't let them be promoted. That will hinder my promotion. And that's what they're worried about. See, the old wise counsel, they're not concerned about that. They're like, we should be trying to help people out. They're already thinking like we should try to be turning things over to the next generation. We should try to be giving other people responsibilities. And you know that as a Christian, that's our job. Your job as a Christian is to raise up the next Christian. It's not just about you. It's not just about me. Oh, I got the position. Look at me. Or I got the position. Look at me. No, it's about let's bring the next ones along. Let's put them into good things. Let's help them along. And see, these young ones, they're concerned. They're like, well, I'm still worried about my position. What's going to happen with me? And this young counsel, it's not what it should be to answer this situation. They thought they had to, squash some ungodly rebellion that was going to happen. That's sort of what's going on in their mind. It's not the case at all. They're simply saying, look, we've been put to hard work for a long time. We're tired, is all they're saying. But see, when you're nervous to maintain your power, you're always thinking that somebody's after you. But when you become comfortable with what the Lord's doing in your life, then you're looking to raise others up. You're looking to promote others. You're looking to help others. What can I do to help them? Even if it's a sacrifice on my part. And see, these young men don't get it yet. So what's going to happen? I guess you know where this is going to go bad. Solomon's going to take the young men's advice. In verse 12, here we go. So Jeroboam and all the people, they came to Rehoboam on the third day as the king had spoken. And they said, when he said to me, return to me on the third day. And so in verse 13, the king answered them harshly. And King Rehoboam forsook the counsel of the elders, and he spoke to them according to the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of events from God. Maybe Charlie Kirk might call it a turning point, except they turned in the wrong direction. It was a turn of events from God, not to God, that Yahweh might establish his word, which he had spoken through Ahijah the Shilonite to Rehoboam, the son of Nebat. And what are we saying there at the end? That this is the prophet, this Ahijah, that is the prophet, that if you go back and you read the 1 Kings chapter 11, that's the one that came and told Rehoboam, I am going to rip 10/12 of the kingdom away from David's lineage and give it to you. And so... You kind of think to yourself, did God make Solomon stupid? Not Solomon, Rehoboam. Did God make Rehoboam stupid? Why did he do this? It's not that. What has to happen for a man to become stupid? Nothing other than God to withdraw. That's it. Just a man not occupied by the presence of God, by the Spirit of God, led by God, left to himself, can make all manner of decisions. That's all it takes. It's not, you read this stuff and you read this expression here where it says, so that this would happen the way the Lord said it would happen. It's not that he had to make this bad decision, but when you make these decisions on your own, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. The Lord knew he was going to make this foolish decision. So when you do not seek the wisdom of God, all you're left with is our own fleshly foolishness, and that will not take us very far. Oh man, the inadequacy of us to do anything good for God apart from his Spirit leading us. I was just hearing that in the conference this week. One of the biggest themes I kept getting out of the conference all week long listening to it was that, as we study the Word of God, as we know the Word of God, this is the knowledge base. This is all that we need for life and godliness. But without the Spirit of God to activate this, to know how to apply this, Lord, okay, I'm getting it. I'm getting your word. I'm learning these things. I'm less stupid than I was before. I'm not in the flesh. I'm hearing your word. But Lord, now I need your Spirit. Now I need your Spirit to direct me. How am I to use this? Where am I to go? Where am I to put this into use? If somebody comes to me and asks me a question like this, how do I know which way to go? Lord, I need your Spirit. I need to know what counsel to apply from your word. The Word of God is the essential. Without it, we don't know how to make our decisions when the time comes. But without the Spirit, we don't know the decision to even make. So let it all be by the Word of God and empowered by the Spirit of God to make these decisions. And I'm going to say Solomon. the whole way through this study. It's his son. It's Rehoboam. Rehoboam will continue to make these foolish decisions because there's no indication that he's giving any heed to the Lord whatsoever. We'll go to verse 16. Now all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them. So the people responded to the king, saying, "What portion do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, David." By the way, do you understand the terminology here? So King David, right? That's the big marker in life. They're going to constantly refer back to King David, right? And Jesse, of course. David was the son of Jesse. Every one of these kings that reigns over Judah is going to be called in some fashion or another a son of David from now on. Rehoboam, he's a grandson of David, but he's of that house and lineage of David. And so that all of this, you'll see this language for the rest of the book. They'll call people the son of Jesse or the son of David, and that's what they're talking about, just that they're in the kingly lineage coming on down through. But this is Jeroboam looking at his people and saying, "I guess we're done here then. We have nothing to do with you. We're leaving. We're going home." Verse 17, "But as for the sons of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them." And that is the official mark of the split. Jeroboam takes 10 of the 12 tribes and he leaves. And he physically, geographically picks up and goes home. Now remember, Rehoboam, what are we doing here, by the way? What's the event? Where are they at? They are literally talking at a coronation ceremony for Rehoboam. He's just become the king. They're doing this in Shechem. It's not a city down south in Judah. Remember, Judah's down south. This is in a northern Israeli city of, well, not very northern, but in the middle of Israel in Shechem, where they're having this. So when this revolt happens and Jeroboam looks at 10 of the 12 tribes and says, "We're leaving," Rehoboam is in their territory having this civil war split at the time and this rebellion over taxes and work and labor union contracts. Verse 18, watch how this ends here. Verse 18, "Then King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, who was over the forced labor, and the sons of Israel stoned him, and he died. And King Rehoboam made haste to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem." So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day, as the author says right there. So after the coronation, Rehoboam watches Jeroboam leave. He watches Jeroboam make this declaration that he's taking 10 of the 12 tribes with him, symbolically. It's not that he had, the whole entire nation wasn't there in the city, but certainly a lot of the leaders were. So Rehoboam's, at this time, he's thinking like, trying to start a rebellion, are you? We'll see how good that works out. And then Rehoboam sends his first tax collector and realizes they really are in rebellion. They kill his tax collector, and he's like, "Whoa, this is real. This is actually happening, this civil war." And so he gets in the chariot and flees back to Jerusalem, which is, of course, the capital of what's going to be Judah, the nation of Judah in the south. It was really considered just a tribe, and now it's considered the entire nation of the southern kingdom, which is Judah. Now, just for general reference, 12 of the tribes will generally be connected now with Jeroboam in the north. The two tribes that we generally talk about in the south is Judah and Benjamin. That is the two tribes in the south. Benjamin as a tribal group geographically, they really assimilated all within the territory of Judah. And so that's just really all together. And then in the north, those 10 tribes start to really mix. Now, there's something important to point out here that you need to understand. This will be very important later. As we get towards the end of the divided kingdom, you may know, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's an important point I need to make. The northern 10 tribes, will go into a captivity and get pretty much dispersed by the Assyrians. Let's not get into too many details, but just know that hundreds of years later, this northern kingdom is going to get dispersed by the Assyrians. Dispersed, like out of the land. The southern kingdom of Judah, that's the kingdom that gets taken into the Babylonian captivity, even long after what happened in the north. There's this contention that people want to bring up to you, And they want to act like these 10 tribes in the north got lost, that they're just lost. And, they make up all kinds of heresies on what happened. The British monarchy is the 10 lost tribes of Israel. You could read about the Mormons calling themselves the 10 lost tribes of Israel. All of these things. This is a good time in your study of the Old Testament to consider all of those crazy things that are out there. Because you're going to start to see here, as the kingdom is beginning to divide, that there will end up being representatives of many of these different tribes that end up making lots of individual decisions to move and change and do things. Okay? Who is the tribe that doesn't have any land? That's the priests. That's the Levites. There's another tribe right there that we're going to talk about even today and what they decide. Now, the big point I'm trying to get across to you right now is don't fall for this lie that there's 10 lost tribes of Israel. Okay? You're going to see even tonight as the nation is splitting, we're going to call the 10 tribes in the north Israel, and we're going to call the 2 in the south Judah. But don't get the impression that that means that every single perfect person that was ethnically of the 10 tribes in the north stayed there. Don't get the impression that if you were ethnically of Judah or Benjamin, well, you just stayed in the south. It didn't happen that way. They certainly moved around. So that's very important to hold in your mind, to understand your way through how Israel comes back into the land and that none of them are lost. It didn't happen that way. So if we go at the end of this chapter 10, it's also very good to note that if you read the parallel account in 1 Kings chapter 12, that does note that the 10 northern tribes, they certainly did at this time anoint Jeroboam to be their king in the north. And so this divided kingdom has officially happened here at the end of chapter 10. Rehoboam has to flee back down south, and Jeroboam takes charge over these 10 tribes in the north. And that is the end of the chapter. Now look, we set up this chapter to talk about dealing with doubters. There's this great divide. These major decisions are being thrust on people. And the question I asked at the beginning of this chapter is, when you're dealing with doubters, when you have major decisions to make, will you listen to the counsel of men? Well, the answer is ultimately, sometimes it's yes and sometimes it's no. Because ultimately what you're looking for through it all is, what would God counsel me? How would God tell me to answer these people? Because very often there's some men that'll say do this, and there's other people that'll say do something totally different. So when you're dealing with doubters, when you're dealing with disputes like that, bring it to the Lord and ask for his counsel, how it should go. Now we go to chapter 11. This brings us into more division, more decision time. Now we're going to be dealing with disruptions. And the question is, will we come to God at all? Or will we just try to handle it on our own? Have you ever been faced with a disruption in your life, something that snuck up on you, you weren't planning on it, but it disrupted your life? Oh, you have. Oh, okay. So this chapter is probably applicable to you. Take a look at the disruption that happens here in chapter 11, verse 1. Then Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, and he assembled the house of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men who could wage war to fight against Israel, to return the kingdom to Rehoboam. So what are they doing? He's trying to get rid of this split. He's going to wage a civil war and try to reunite the country. Verse 2. But the word of Yahweh came to Shemaiah, the man of God. This is a prophet, saying to him, go speak to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all Israel in Judah. That's a very interesting point, even right there. The writer of this book reminds us that there's a lot of people of the tribes of Israel that are in Judah. Okay, even there's our first indication that many of the tribes are represented down south. In Judah and Benjamin, and say to them, thus saith Yahweh, you shall not go up and fight against your brothers. Return every man to his house, for this thing is from me. So they listened to the words of Yahweh, and they returned from going against Jeroboam. So Rehoboam just assumes, I should go fight, and I should go bring this back together. He just assumes it. He never even bothers to ask the Lord. Sometimes the Lord will hinder our progress because of our sin. That's exactly what's happened in Rehoboam. This didn't have to happen to him, that much of the kingdom was ripped away from him. But it was because of his own bad counsel, his own not relying on the Lord. And now at this point, it's too late to go back and try to recover something that was lost. It's no longer in God's will. And so he just assumes that I should go back, and no, ask the Lord what you should do, right? What is that movie? I saw a movie recently about this idea that there's still this idea in some false religions that if a man has a divorce and marries somebody else, but then he finds out that his first wife wants to reconcile, they teach you that, well, you should divorce your second wife and you should go back and reconcile after you've already married a second wife. And they would say, well, you should divorce her and you should go back to your first wife. And that's like this. Rehoboam is just like taking this assumption, like, well, I should go back. I got to get this back. And the Lord's like, it's too late for that. You've already missed the blessing. You've already been disobedient. You can't go backwards and try to fix things. And so he never bothers to ask the Lord. And the Lord comes to him through a prophet and says, don't do it. Don't do it. You cannot fix yesterday's mistakes. The Lord never asks us to fix yesterday. He tells us to live for me today. That is always his counsel. Deal with today. They never bothered to seek God's word regarding what to do, and now it's biting them. And now they want to all of a sudden get serious and go back and fix yesterday's problems. You can't do it. It doesn't work it never works that way. So they're faced here with counsel. Except this time it's not the young men, it's not the old men, it's the voice of God coming through this prophet. And of course they listen. Rehoboam listens to this prophet, and he doesn't try to go back and try to fix yesterday's mistakes. And so that's smart of him to do that. Too bad he wouldn't have done it in the first place before trying to launch this invasion. All the prep time and all the effort trying to prepare this war, that then he stopped and didn't bother. Verse 5. Rehoboam lived in Jerusalem and built cities for fortifications in Judah. Thus he built Bethlehem, and you can read every one of the names of these cities here. I'm not going to butcher the names, but I will point out a couple of significance. Bethlehem, of course, is significant. The house of David, where Jesus Christ will be born. Tekoa, you might know that one there in verse 6. Anybody know that one? What's Tekoa? Anybody know? Jeremiah's hometown. Okay, you've got here Gath in verse 8. That, of course, is one of the cities along the coast that had been run by the Philistines. You get down to verse 10. One of them listed here is Hebron. Anybody know why Hebron's important? Come on, are you in class or not? Come on, class. You got this. Anybody know Hebron? Yes. Hey, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the burial place of all of the patriarchs was there in Hebron. So all of these cities here, Rehoboam fortifies in Judah and Benjamin. Verse 11, he also strengthened the fortresses and put officers in them and stores of food and oil and wine. And he put large shields and spears in every city and strengthened them greatly. So he held Judah and Benjamin. So Rehoboam, stung by this civil war, he goes defensive here is the idea, and he just starts, it's almost like somebody that's literally been stung, right? You ever been stung and you're just like, I ain't gonna let that happen again? Like the next time you go out to garden, you're like wearing a beekeeper suit, right? And you're like, I ain't gonna have that happen again, right? That's kind of the idea. That's what's happened to him. He's like, oh, I've been stung by this once. I'm gonna be fortifying now. These 15 cities, though, what's interesting here is that it seems that his attention, his nervousness, isn't about Jeroboam coming down again, but these 15 cities are actually to his south and west. And so what he's doing here is he's actually strengthening himself, and he's preparing himself against Egypt. He's concerned about the pharaohs in Egypt attacking him even more than Jeroboam. And so I'm sure he's thinking Jeroboam's got enough trouble of his own just to try to, get his kingdom figured out, and God's already told me not to attack him. So he starts strengthening his southern flank. He's worried about Egypt. Now, verse 13. Now we have another group here that has to make some decisions. This is interesting. Verse 13. Moreover, the priests and the Levites who were in all Israel. What are we talking about when we say in all Israel? We're really talking about the ones in the north. Okay, most of the time now that term Israel is going to refer to that northern part that was taken by Jeroboam. These priests and Levites in verse 13, who were in all Israel, they took their stand with him from all their territories. In verse 14, for the Levites left their pasture lands and their possessions of land, and they went to what? They went to Judah and Jerusalem. Why? For Jeroboam and his sons had rejected them from ministering as priests to Yahweh. And he set up priests of his own. That is Jeroboam in the north. He set up his own priests for his own high places, for the goat demons. You might have a translation like devils, I think, in the King James for that. But it's literally goat demons. Isn't that interesting, though, that Satanists today still use the goat head as one of their symbols? And for the calves which he had made. He's given us these stories of all these things Jeroboam did in the north to set up idolatry. One more verse, verse 16. Now those from all tribes of Israel who gave their hearts to seek Yahweh, the God of Israel, followed them to Jerusalem to sacrifice to Yahweh, the God of their fathers. You see this? This is a major decision point. Remember, the priests didn't have land, so where were they told to go? They were told to go, and they were going to be given pasture lands throughout all of the land, the whole country. That's where the priests lived, all over the land. In fact, they even had a couple of cities throughout the land, cities of refuge and different things. But these priests and Levites were designed to be throughout the entire land. Well, Jeroboam, the story that we're not given, which you can read about in 1 Kings, Jeroboam, when he gets up north, he's concerned immediately that, well, okay, we got this. I've got all of these Israelites following me, but we're told every year that we're supposed to go down to Jerusalem 3 times a year to worship Yahweh. Well, if I let them keep doing that, their hearts are going to be turned to Rehoboam. I can't let that happen. So Jeroboam, in an effort to keep his own power, decides to set up 2 calves for worship. One in Dan in the extreme north and one in Bethel, which would be the extreme southern part of his kingdom. Like Bethel, as if you were going to be going down to Jerusalem, and then you'd get to Bethel first. And so he did this to get people to go worship there and not to leave and go down to Jerusalem. And it's all idol worship. Jeroboam set up all of this idol worship and demon worship in the north. He forsook the Lord simply to try to retain his own power. Isn't that sad? And yet, how many people do that today? You know, they get a good job and they're just like, well, you know, if I want to keep this job, I have to blend in with the guys or whatever. And they completely blow it with their testimony just to blend in, just to keep some temporary power. And that's exactly what Jeroboam is doing in the north. Just trying to do anything he can to keep his power. But I want to focus on these priests. These priests from all 12 tribes, but especially the 10 tribes in the north. They're faced with this decision. I mean, one day you go to bed and you're a part of this United Nation. Then the next day you wake up and you're being told, well, Jeroboam's our king now, and we now live in a separate country up north here that's apart from Jerusalem. Oh, and by the way, your new king, he's set up a whole new style of worship that has nothing to do with you as a priest. And you're faced with a decision. You know what typically happens, right? When the mergers come to the companies, when the buyouts happen, they go to all the employees and they're like, hey, you're not company X anymore. Now you work for company Y. But no problem. We're going to continue to pay you. Your job duties have changed a little bit, though. Right? They come to these priests and they'd be like, hey, you can stay here. Just be a priest for us. Doing it our way. To a false god. And so they're faced with these major decisions. And I sit here and you read the text, and the text talks about how so many of these priests and Levites, they migrated down south. They're like, we cannot be here. If this nation has given themselves over to a new form of false worship, we can't be here. We're leaving. But I always wonder, how many stayed? How many stayed and rationalized it and justified it and said, well, I just don't have a choice. You know, you come up with every excuse in the book, don't you? Well, this is where the Lord's planted my family. I guess this is where he wants us to stay. Or whatever. You just come up with any excuse to just continue into this new paradigm, this new thing which is all wrong, all idolatry. I wonder how many of these priests and Levites stayed. But every one of those priests had some major decisions to make. Giant disruptions came to their life, and they had decisions to make. Will they serve the true God, or will they just do what's expected of them? It's a matter of the heart. Will they give their heart? Is their heart given to God? If so, then they're either going to try to stand for God in that idolatrous land up north, or they're going to migrate to where they can have some religious freedom, pilgrims. Right? Isn't that how we started over here? Puritans and pilgrims and people just saying, look, if you're going to kill me for trying to serve God over there, I'm going over here. And that's what many of them did. And they came down south. Verse 17, that they strengthened the kingdom of Judah and gave courage to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, for 3 years. For they walked in the way of David and Solomon for 3 years. There's no escape for each of them. Their decisions will strengthen or will hinder those around them. And I find this fascinating that many of these priests, they came down south and they were able to reinvigorate Solomon and the priests down there to keep going. Hey, let's serve the Lord. Yes, it's smaller now. Yeah, I get it. We've lost a lot, but we could still serve the Lord in purity, the way he wants. You think the Lord's worried about the abundance of your life, or do you think the Lord's worried about the purity of your life? I just heard a speaker at the conference 2 days ago. It was David Rosales. And I wish I could set up everything he said for the next half an hour. I don't have time for that, but I'll just tell you the punchline. And he just was talking about the blessings of running this church for 48 years or 50 years or something. And he just said, I would so much rather have a pure church than a big church. I would so much rather have people that just love the Lord than a bunch of people that don't care. And I identify with that. I think Rehoboam and certainly these priests can identify with that. They're like, look, we're coming here. It's smaller now here in Jerusalem. Lots of less people are following us, but at least we could serve the Lord in purity here. And that's exactly what they wanted. This is a great passage. If you ever have a friend going through a church split, this is a good passage to give to them. These priests and their decision that they made to live in purity, in a place that they could live in purity. Verse 18. Then Rehoboam took a wife, Mahalath, the daughter of Jeremoth, the son of David, and of Abihail, the daughter of Eliab, the son of Jesse. And verse 19, she bore him sons. And there's 3 sons listed there that Rehoboam had by his wife Mahalath. And then verse 20, and after he took Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, and she bore him, you can notice 4 sons listed. In verse 21, Rehoboam loved Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, more than his other wives and concubines, for he had taken 18 wives. We only got 2 of them a moment ago, but altogether there was 18 wives and 60 concubines, and became the father of 28 sons and 60 daughters. And verse 22, Rehoboam set up Abijah the son of Maacah to be his head and ruler among his brothers, for he intended to make him king. And he acted with discernment and distributed some of his sons throughout all the lands of Judah and Benjamin to all the fortified cities, and he gave them sustenance in abundance, and he sought a multitude of wives for them. So Rehoboam does not get any better as life goes on. I mean, not just his disobedience and not listening to the Lord, never looking to the Lord for counsel. Certainly here, even within his family, he continues in breaking the law of Moses with multiple wives and concubines. Here at the end of this section, it's pointing out that he wanted his son Abijah to be the next king after him. And so early on, he sets him up as the crown prince. He more or less names him, hey, you're going to be my successor. But he does something interesting with all of his 28 sons. He disperses them throughout the land. Oh, he keeps them happy. He gives them lots of sustainment and food and supplies, I'm sure, but he split them up because, a foolish king would keep them all together where they could launch a rebellion against you and put one of them in charge. And so he splits them up, but he names which one he's going to be a king over him. So he's sort of a shrewd leader in that sense. He knows he's all about protecting himself. His whole life is really characterized by just simply trying to protect his own power. If you remember anything about this man, Rehoboam, this is what we're given. Never worried about asking the Lord what's good or bad, but just worried about protecting himself and retaining his own powers. How sad. And it doesn't work anyway. Now we go into chapter 12. It's a shorter chapter. We've already had these major decision points of dealing with doubters and dealing with major disruptions like these priests. Well, we go into chapter 12, and it brings another feature, another big decision point that we often have to deal with, which is simply defeat. Dealing with defeat. Sometimes we simply get overwhelmed and we get defeated. It's not within our control. It's too late. It's beyond our abilities, and we get defeated. And how will we deal with that? Will we live in worship to God, or will we turn to idolatry? I ask that question because it's usually a double-edged sword. It's usually because we are living in idolatry that we go into defeat, but then it's also the case on how you get out of it. Will you come back and be a worshiper of the Lord, or will you continue in what you know is wrong and giving your heart to things that are wrong? So not only is this the way you fall into defeat, it's also the way out of defeat. So take a look at what happens here in chapter 12. All of Rehoboam's fears, this fearful man, all of his fears come true. All of that protection that he put in place against Egypt isn't going to do him any good, because Egypt is going to come against him anyway in chapter 12. And so verse 1. Now it happened that when the kingdom of Rehoboam was established and strong, he and all Israel with him forsook the law of Yahweh. Evil. It says that he did evil. He forsook the law and did evil. In fact, in the book of Kings, the cross-reference to this, it tells us specifically that these things that he did was evil. And it's evil in the way that, in the sense that he provoked God to jealousy by giving their worship, all of them in Judah, they gave their worship to false gods. In fact, it even says in the King's references that they were into every debauchery there was, including homosexuality. And this is in Judah. This is in the south. This is in the place where they still had temple worship. They still came to church every Sunday. And yet they had all of this idol worship. And they allowed all of this idolatry and lustful everything. And Rehoboam's influence led the entire nation into these things. Verse 2. Now it happened in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, because they had been unfaithful to Yahweh, that Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen, and the people who came with him from Egypt were without number, the Lubim, the Sikkim, and the Ethiopians. In verse 4, and he captured the fortified cities of Judah and came as far as Jerusalem. Captured the fortified cities. Didn't we just read about that like a chapter ago? You know, this nervous little man and all of his fortifying of these cities did no good. It did no good. In all of your greatest effort and strength, if you're doing things completely apart from the Lord, it just doesn't matter. It's meaningless. It's helpless, futile effort to do all this work if the Lord's blessing is not in it. All of this is done because they were unfaithful to God. And so the Lord sent Egypt to chastise them. These are the types of things, this whole invasion by Egypt, these are the types of things we can avoid by simple obedience to the Lord. We're so stuck on this idea that, well, this happened because, well, maybe my cities weren't fortified enough and Egypt looked and they saw weakness, so therefore they came and attacked. No, they came and attacked because the Lord sent them. Sometimes you're suffering defeats in your life. We suffer defeats not because we're weak, not because we didn't plan for it, but because the Lord sent it to chastise us and to correct us, to get our attention. Oh, he was prepared, but all of his preparation meant nothing if he didn't have the Lord's blessing and help. People say, how many times do you hear people say, well, I just can't get ahead. Every time I try this or that, I just can't get ahead. Obedience to God is so much more valuable than money and resources and planning and stuff. To know that you're in God's will and that he's got your back, that is so much more valuable than any preparation and fortifying of cities that you can make. Verse 5. Now, Shemaiah the prophet came. This is the same prophet, by the way, that we saw last chapter. Shemaiah the prophet came to Rehoboam and the princes of Judah who had gathered at Jerusalem because of Shishak. And he said to them, thus saith the Lord, you have forsaken me, so I have forsaken you to Shishak. So the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves and said, Yahweh is righteous. This is the same prophet that had come and said, don't go fight a civil war against Israel in the north. But notice, please, here that the problem wasn't that they had forsaken their defenses or forsaken their economy. Or they didn't forsake their families or anything like that. No, they forsook their God. That's what the problem was. Every earthly preparation in the world makes no good if you're still forsaking the Lord. Everything can be right, but forsaking the Lord, everything can go down so quick. So quick. We must be serving God with our plan, with our routine, and with our resources. Verse 7. When Yahweh saw that they humbled themselves, the word of Yahweh came to Shemaiah, saying, they have humbled themselves, so I will not bring them to ruin. He's not going to wipe them out. But I will grant them some measure of escape, and my wrath shall not be poured out on Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. The idea here is that this could have been just like the Babylonian captivity. This could have been an absolute wipe them out, tear down the temple, kick them out of the land. This could have been it. But they did humble themselves. And the Lord says, okay, then I will not fully make an end to them. Verse 8, but they will become his slaves so that they may know the difference between my slavery and the slavery of the kingdoms of the countries around. Wow, interesting. They didn't like being slaves to God. They thought that was somehow bad. So God's like, oh, you think it's hard to be my servants? I'm going to show you what hard is. I'm going to make you be a servant to your sin. I'm going to make you be a servant to mankind. And then you'll know just how good it is to serve me. And some of us hard-headed people like me that didn't get saved till I was 25, we know what it means to be a servant to sin. And then you come to Christ and you're like, Lord, you are a good master. You are so kind. You require so little. All you want is my heart. That's it. Oh, you can have it. You deserve it. We're called slaves of God, doulos, in the scriptures. You're going to be a slave to something, but being a slave to God, oh, so worth it. So repentance here has granted a removal of the wrath that would have come, but there's still going to be consequences that they now have to live through. That's the same for us. Very, very often the Lord, when humbling and when repentance comes on our part, there can be a remission. There could be an alleviation of what might have happened and how bad it could have gotten. Oh, but consequences are still real. Yes. I don't think we need to illustrate that. I think you get it. Consequences are still real. Verse 9. So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and he took the treasures of the house of Yahweh. That's the very temple we're talking about. And the treasures of the king's house. He took everything. He even took the shields of gold which Solomon had made. Then King Rehoboam, he made shields of bronze in their place, and he committed them into the hand of the commanders of the guard who kept the door of the king's house. Now it happened that as often as the king entered the house of Yahweh, the guards would come and carry them and then bring them back into the guard's room. In verse 12, and when he humbled himself, the anger of Yahweh turned away from him, so as to not ruin him completely, and also conditions were good in Judah. So all this gold. You remember when Solomon was building the temple and he made all this stuff? It was gold in abundance. We talked about dump trucks full of gold that came in every year, right? I think it was 2 dump trucks worth of gold every year that was coming in. You remember how they talked about the silver? They talked about this, how much silver. It was just silver in so much abundance. They weren't even counting it anymore. But notice now, as Shishak, this stuff only lasted 40 years. In disobedience from his grandson, has it all taken away. King David's grandson, that is. David's the one who stored up the money for all this. And it's all taken away. After just 40 years of Solomon's reign, it's all gone and being taken into captivity. We talked the last time we were together about the tomb of Shishak was actually found recently in the 1900s, and the sarcophagus was 100% gold. Wonder where he got that from, right? The whole thing. And notice, they remake these shields, and they don't even make them out of silver. They make them out of bronze. Even the silver is gone. What happened to having gold so much they couldn't even count it? It's all gone. It's all taken to Egypt, replaced by bronze. You know what's so fascinating about the replacement of gold shields with bronze shields? There's a property of gold in which they would never need shined up. There they are, just shining as bright as the sun, in perfect condition, looking awesome. And now we replace it with what? With bronze. Oh, it kind of looks like gold. Oh, it's meant to be like gold. But man, if you don't polish that stuff up, it's going to look like trash in a hurry. It's all about man's effort now. Oh, we got to do it. We got to keep it up. We got to keep it looking good. They lost the blessing of God. And now they're just left with their own efforts in this condition of disobedience. Got to maintain the shine. What a decline this is. Disobedience will always cost more than you plan, and will always take you farther than you want to go, and it will always take more effort to live in disobedience. You wonder why you're tired? Wonder if it's because you're in disobedience to God. It takes a lot of effort to be in disobedience to God and maintain that life. Let's continue verse 13. So King Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem, and he reigned. Now Rehoboam was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahweh had chosen from all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah the Ammoritess. Verse 14, he did evil because he did not set his heart to seek Yahweh. This is a really big accumulative sentence for his life right there. In verse 15, now the acts of Rehoboam from first to last, are they not written in the records of Shemaiah the prophet and also of Iddo the seer, according to the genealogical record? Now in other words, that's a rhetorical sentence. It means yes, of course they're written there. Now there were wars between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all their days. And Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And Abijah, his son, became king in his place. And so his lineage here, Rehoboam's lineage, it will continue. But he himself, he is characterized here as being one that did evil. Why? Because he didn't set his heart on the Lord, to seek the Lord. There's a proactive nature that the Lord is always looking for from us. To be ones that don't just like turn to him in those, oh, I messed up, Lord, what do I do? Be my genie in a bottle. No, but the one that says, I know you have the words of life. Help me out before I even go. That's what he wants from us. That's a heart that is set on the Lord. It's a preparation in advance to serve the Lord. You know, it bothers me every time I see somebody that does their tithes and offerings with zero planning. You know, like, oh, here comes the plate. Oh, okay, yeah. You know, there's zero preparation. Their heart wasn't set on that. I think the Lord would rather you not do that. There was zero thought that went into that. The Lord would say, set your heart on me. Make a plan. How do you want to live for me? What do you think should be the goals? Plan ahead. Make God so important that you actually plan ahead how he's going to be a part of your life. Instead of this afterthought of, yeah, let's do this. Set your heart. That expression will come up again and again through the rest of this book. The ones that set their heart on the Lord. Jehoshaphat will be one that it says he set his heart on the Lord. Ezra is another great example of one that says he set his heart on the Lord. And so it mentions there at the end of verse 16 that after he dies, his son Abijah takes over, and we'll get to him, Lord willing, next time we're together. So just look at these three decision points. Have you come to some of these decision points in your life? major decision points. Sometimes you choose them, you plan for them, here comes the decision point. Other times these decision points are just thrust on us. When we're dealing with doubters, will we listen to men? Well, if those men are in sin and saying to follow sin, then no. But if it's just to accommodate some requests, then yes, we can do that, right? We want to show ourselves to be servants and helpful to people. Number two, have you been dealing with disruptions? The question is, will we listen to God? Just as those priests were faced with those disruptions and, well, what are we going to do now? Will we listen to God? Well, when God speaks to us, certainly we should listen. You remember when Shemaiah came to Rehoboam and said, don't do that. And Rehoboam was smart enough to say, oh, okay, that's good. But even better than that, let's get proactive. Let's ask the Lord ahead of time on our own what we should do to avoid wasted time and effort and pain that might come otherwise. And what about defeat? Are you dealing with defeat? The question is, will we live in worship or in idolatry? To repent from idolatry, oh, that's good. But to never get involved with it in the first place is so much better. Don't ever think, well, I just wish I had one of them testimonies that my life was absolutely in the toilet and then it got better. You don't want that testimony. Take it from someone that's got kind of one of those. You don't want it. You don't want to have to experience the depths of depravity to be able to stand up front and have everybody go, oh, that's so amazing. I wish it wasn't. I wish it was beautiful and a bed of roses. Yeah, trust me. We don't want that. We want our kids, our grandkids, we want our friends to experience the easy road of obedience. Our pastor in Maine used to always say the easy way is hard enough. You do it that way. There's a lot more blessings in that path. To never get involved in the idolatry in the first place would be so much better. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 25, it says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end leads to death. Man's counsel. But now in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 28, it says, in the path of righteousness there is life, and in that pathway there is no death. And that's the path we want. It's just a question of, do you believe it? That one path will lead to righteousness and blessing in life, and your own path will lead to destruction, defeat, despair, doubting, troubles all around. There's the choice. I set before you life and death. God says, choose life. That's our choice tonight. So major decisions will come up on us. Sometimes we don't have any choice, and we need to choose. Choose to serve the Lord and listen to him and come to him. So, Lord willing, we'll be here next week. And if that's the case, just look ahead and study yourself up. Get ready for the kingdom of Abijah and then his son Asa after that. So, Lord willing, we'll get into those two kings the next time we're together. Let's pray.